Have you ever heard of a government that was so successful it actually destroyed itself? Well, that's pretty much the story of the Roman Republic. We're talking about a 500-year-old superpower that just crumbled from the inside out. And this collapse paved the way for one of the most famous and controversial leaders in all of history, Julius Caesar. Now look, this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. It's a real-life political thriller about ambition, power, betrayal, and how even the strongest systems can break.
So that's the big question, right? How does a republic that lasts for 5 whole centuries, a system specifically designed to stop one person from getting too powerful, suddenly just end? To figure that out, we've got to go back in time, to a Rome before all the famous emperors we think of today.
Okay, and this is super important. You know, when you think of Rome, you probably picture the Colosseum, right? The powerful emperors, all that grandeur. But that was the final chapter of the story. For most of its life, Rome was something completely different. It didn't start as this huge empire. It started as a pretty modest city-state, and for 500 years, it was governed as a republic.
All right, so let's set the stage here. Before Caesar becomes the star of our show, you need to understand the world he was walking into. The Republic, it was still around, but man, it was a system under some serious stress. The cracks were definitely starting to show.
So for hundreds of years, this is just how things were done in Rome. There was no single all-powerful ruler. The whole idea was to avoid having a king. Instead, power was split up. You had the Senate, this body of the most influential men in the Republic, and then you had officials who were elected by the people. The entire system was built on tradition, law, and this deep, deep fear of ever being ruled by a king again.
But here's the crazy part, the big irony. The Republic's incredible success was actually what started to tear it apart. All those centuries of conquering new lands brought a ton of wealth into Rome, and all that new money just fueled these nasty power struggles among the rich and powerful. But even more important, all this constant warfare created a new, really dangerous kind of person, the celebrity general. These guys had huge armies that were incredibly loyal to them personally. I mean, he was the guy paying them, leading them into battle, making them rich. Why would they care about some distant politicians back in Rome?
And this is where our main character walks on stage. The man who wouldn't just use these cracks to his advantage, he was going to blow the whole thing wide open. Let's talk about Julius Caesar.
So who was this guy? To put it simply, Caesar was an absolute superstar, both politically and on the battlefield. We're talking about a brilliant strategist, a ruthless commander. He had just spent years conquering Gaul, which is basically modern-day France. His victories were the stuff of legend, and he was, without a doubt, the most celebrated man in Rome.
And this right here, this is the heart of the whole problem. For your average Roman citizen, Caesar was a total hero, no question about it. He was a winner. He brought them glory and money from his conquests. But for the powerful senators, the old establishment, his crazy popularity and his battle-hardened army didn't make him a hero. To them, he was a massive threat, like an existential threat to their entire way of life and, let's be honest, their own power.
Yeah, you can probably guess that this tension between Caesar and the Senate, it just couldn't go on forever. And everything exploded at this one spot, a little river in northern Italy called the Rubicon. This is where Caesar would make a decision that would change history forever.
Okay, we really need to get how serious this was. There was this one Roman law that was completely non-negotiable. The Rubicon River was the official border of Italy. For a general to bring his army across that river, that wasn't just breaking a rule. That was an act of treason. It was basically a declaration of war against your own country.
So the Senate, totally freaked out by his power, gives him an order. Ditch your army and come home as a regular guy. So what's he gonna do? He's got 2 options. Obey and probably get thrown in jail or worse by his enemies, or defy the Senate and plunge the entire republic into a civil war.
Well, he made his choice. In the year 49 BC, he says those famous words, "The die is cast." And he leads his army right across the Rubicon. There was no going back from this. It was done. The Roman Republic was now officially at war with its greatest general.
What followed was a brutal, nasty civil war. But in the end, Caesar came out on top. He crushed his enemies, and when he walked back into Rome, he wasn't just a hero anymore. He was, for all intents and purposes, the master of the entire Roman world.
So there it is. Caesar won. He had all the power you could possibly imagine. But as you're about to see, getting that kind of power, well, it comes with a pretty steep price. Okay, so with all his rivals gone, Caesar gets to work locking down his power. The Senate, which was now mostly full of his buddies, gave him a title that no Roman had ever held before: dictator for life. Think about that. In a republic built on term limits, this was insane. It broke every tradition. Rome basically had a king in all but name.
And that was the final straw. That was the fear that pushed his enemies over the edge. To them, dictator for life sounded an awful lot like king, the one thing the Republic was created to prevent. So in the shadows, a group of senators started plotting. They truly believed they were patriots, that they were saving the Republic.
And on the Ides of March, that's March 15th, 44 BC, they made their move. Right there on the floor of the Senate, they cornered him, and they stabbed him 23 times.
So the assassins thought they'd done it. They thought they'd saved the Republic.
Oh man, were they wrong. Let's talk about what happened next, because this is maybe the most shocking twist in the whole story.
And here is the biggest irony of all. Killing Caesar didn't fix anything. It didn't bring the old republic back. All it did was create this giant power vacuum. And the result? It wasn't freedom. It was another decade of civil war, even bloodier than the last one.
You know, this is like a textbook case of unintended consequences. So you have the assassination. That leads directly to chaos and more war. And then, out of all that bloodshed, one guy rises to the top. Caesar's adopted son, a young, brilliant, and totally ruthless guy named Octavian. And he would soon go by a new name, Augustus.
And these two dates basically tell the whole story. So in 44 BC, they kill Caesar to stop one man from being king. But then, just 17 years later, in 27 BC, his own heir, Augustus, becomes something way more powerful, the very first Roman emperor. The Republic was officially over.
So we're left with this incredible question, this paradox, right? How did this one act, this assassination that was supposed to save the Republic, actually end up creating the empire? It turns out they killed the man, but they couldn't kill the idea of one-man rule. That idea had already taken root, thanks to all the problems the Republic was already facing. It's just a crazy lesson in how the road to tyranny can sometimes be paved with what seems like the best of intentions.